Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be once again talking about another Disney Plus show. You know, Ahsoka just ended literally like 2 days ago, and Disney's not going to give me any break whatsoever because we're starting off with Loki Season 2, finally premiering after nearly 2.5 years being off the air ever since that first season that I absolutely love. This is easily by far my most anticipated MCU thing to date, and I was so excited to watch this episode, and I love this first episode, and I'm here to talk about all these spoilers in this episode. So if you've not seen the first episode of Season 2 of Loki, go check it out on Disney Plus, then come back and let's talk about it. So Loki Season 2 picks up exactly where that first season ending after Sylvie had kicked Loki through the time door and he showed up in the TVA and nobody seemed to recognize him, and there were statues and towers of He Who Remains or Kang the Conqueror all over the TVA, and he had no idea what in the world was going on, and we ended off on that cliffhanger. And that's exactly where we pick up here in this episode with Loki running away from all these TVA agents because they think he is a variant that is out of his time, which he is a variant out of his time, but not in the way that we thought he was. And I think everybody assumed, including me, that Loki ended up in a different timeline at the end of the last season because nobody recognized him, that he was just in a place where these were different variants of these characters, but that was very much not the case because that wouldn't make sense. What would make sense is that Loki is stuck in a different time period within the TVA itself because the TVA is not on any timeline. It's outside of all these timelines, so it's going to have its own little time stream. So he's not in a different variant of the TVA. He's in the same TVA, but in the past. And there's this very fun little time slipping thing where he violently shrinks down and stretches and just warps into like a little like spaghetti stretchy noodle thing. I don't know how to describe it. It's a very interesting visual to see, but he essentially shrinks down and pops in different time periods in this episode throughout the entire thing, and they call it time slipping, and he's basically just being ripped through time because of the events of what happened in the last season. And so this episode's goal is to essentially take all the chaos that was kind of left in the air at the end of the last season and kind of streamline it into a way that is very fun and entertaining, to try to explain all this weird and wacky timey-wimey stuff in this episode in a very fun, concise way by introducing the title character of the episode, Ouroboros, who is played by Huy Quan, who of course was phenomenal in Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I just love Huy Quan so much, and I think there's so many fun behind the scenes like ties between Everything Everywhere All at Once and Loki, with, you know, the Daniels at one point being offered to direct the first season of Loki, and of course they wanted to do their own original thing, which brought back Huy Quan into the fold of mainstream, you know, Hollywood. And of course now Huy Quan is bouncing back over to the series that the Daniels were supposed to do to begin with. So there's a lot of great little kind of Easter eggs and just behind the scenes little trivia behind all of this. But it's so great to see Huy Quan in a character that he feels comfortable playing. And the best part about him in this role is that he's given the weight of having to explain all of this stuff with the time slipping and why things are happening in the TVA that are happening in the TVA, and how to solve this whole time slipping thing with this little machine that he made in the past, because Loki talked to him in the past but is also talking to him in the present, and Mobius is talking to him in the present, and these memories are coming back to him in the moment because of how this time travel thing is working. And it's explained in such an interesting and fun way in all this exposition because you're having these actors that are very into this sequence, and the bouncing back and forth and the comedy within trying to explain all this stuff, and Ouroboros being like, oh yeah, you know, that isn't possible, but I did just witness it. Like, I literally saw it happen, even though it shouldn't be possible at all. And so there's a lot of fun elements playing back and forth between all these characters that just play off of each other so well.
Good point. It sure would be more convenient if we were having this conversation in the future and this were the past.
We were. This is the... Never mind.
And yes, all of this timey-wimey stuff is extremely convoluted, and it can be extremely overwhelming, even to me, who absolutely loves all this time travel stuff. I've always said that if there's time travel in a movie or TV show, it's immediately going to make it like bump up a star for me in Letterboxd. I just love these type of storylines so much, and so I had a lot of fun with all this, but it was even overwhelming to me because of how complicated it was, with how fast everybody was talking, how fast this episode was moving, with the energy that it had, that it is kind of overwhelming, but it did fit the chaos of what happened at the end of the last season. And I imagine if you watched last season and that finale with that more slow, methodical, like the dialogue driven episode that was, and ending in that very chaotic way with the timelines branching out, and to see the TVA react to that, all that chaos in a very, you know, through line type of way where it feels natural, and how it kind of expanded and got chaotic and it doesn't slow down at the beginning of this season, because I think a lot of TV shows do that. They end in a very high note in the season finale and they start at a very like normal season premiere type of way. But no, this episode kicks off in the chaos that was set up in the last episode. So I do think it works here. And another great thing about time travel in media, the type of things that you can play with, is with Loki going back to the past and to the future and to the present. There's all these different details that you get to see in all these different timelines that kind of carry through. Like when the TV falls down and cracks the tile, he knows that he's in the past because in the future or in the main present timeline, he's talking to Casey and that crack is still on the ground. And so yeah, that's how he figured out that he was in the past. Or in the later in the episode when he sees, Mobius write skin on the dust and the little TV in the background, you get to see him glitch over to the future and that writing is still there. And what I loved about that sequence right there in general is, he's looking for the little time stick to prune himself because he needs to prune himself so Mobius can pull him through time through this little machine that's, Ouroboros made for him, that is in this like the time slipping thing. I don't know, it's so complicated to try to explain. While he's looking for that, he's walking through this future hallway where everything is even more chaotic than it was at the present moment where we were last in the episode, and you're going to get to whatever is happening in this moment later on in this season, and whatever chaos is going through the TVA with all these bodies lying around and all these people in utter panic and just running around and the lights being flickering on and off and the elevator door opens. You get to see Sylvie there while the phone is ringing, and I really wanted him to answer that phone, and I'm sure that phone is going to be somebody calling for somebody at some certain moment, and whoever pruned Loki in that moment is probably pruning him because he knows that he needed to be pruned at that time in order to be pulled back in the past in order for him to go in that journey. So I'm sure Loki is the one who actually pruned himself in that moment behind him, and then you get to have that reunion of Loki and Sylvie in that moment. And honestly, if the first time Loki and Sylvie interact in this entire season is that moment in the future in like the final episode of the season, I will absolutely love that, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the case. But either way, having these timelines bounce back and forth, having the statues of He Who Remains in the TVA, or being behind the mural in one of the war rooms, or whatever the case may be, all these little things connecting together through time that is just very detail oriented. I love that sort of stuff. And so the moment that we get back to that point in time where we skip to the future in this episode, I hope that is very satisfying as a viewer to see this whole season come full circle by the end of it. I just love that sort of writing in the time travel media. But besides Loki and Mobius and Ouroboros' little, attempt to try to get Loki from slipping through time and all that sort of stuff that is kind of the main plot of this episode, you also have B-15, and you have all these other people in the TVA who are introduced in this episode who are trying to keep everything together because nobody else in the TVA knows what happened in that last season, with them believing that they're all variants and that's, the TVA was created to try to force this timeline into one thing, and all the timelines that they've pruned, they now see as murdering all these people that had lives and had a future. But now that the time is ripped apart and the threat of Kang kind of being everywhere now and having all these different variants coming to start a new war and how dangerous that could be, now Loki kind of changing his mind in all of that, they now need to try to figure out what they need to do next. Because I think what was brilliant about that first season was to have a character have this goal the entire time, throughout the entire season. And once they finally reach that goal, to realize that they might have been wrong, and to now deal with the consequences of whether or not he was wrong, is going to be such an interesting direction to bring this season. You're also introduced to some new characters in the TVA, like Dickie, who is in stuff like The Northman and The Green Knight and films like that I absolutely love, and Rafael Casal, who I love in Blind Spotting, which they didn't really have a lot to do in this episode, but that they're going to be some sort of form of antagonism with trying to get the bureaucracy of the TVA back in order. So I'm very curious to see what direction they go with those characters, but they're all, getting together with a bunch of other agents going through this time door to try to essentially get Sylvie back. And there's also the question of whether or not that is what they're actually doing, because that's a lot of resources just to get Sylvie. But how easy it's been for Sylvie to slip through the grasps of all these different TVA agents from that first season. So I guess it could be very possible that that is the goal of what they're doing here. But it does set up all these characters and all these different storylines in this season in a very quick and efficient way, in a very fun and entertaining way, with its exposition and with its energy and with the performances and with the chemistry behind all the cast members in this episode, in a very overwhelming way that leads to hopefully a great season of TV. And I cannot wait to get into the rest of the episodes this season. And I was very consistent with Ahsoka, with having weekly videos on Ahsoka because it was releasing on a Wednesday. Now with this show on a Thursday, it might be a little hard for me to get to weekly episodes. I'll try to at least get a short out for you guys every single week, if not a whole video talking about spoilers for each episode. But definitely stay tuned on this channel, because I will keep on talking about Loki for as long as this show goes on. on because I absolutely love everything about it. And there was a post-credit scene also in this episode. If you guys did miss it, it shows Sylvie going through a time door and going to McDonald's and not knowing that she can't order like live rats or something like that from the counter instead of, you know, just ordering McNuggets or a quarter pounder with cheese or something like that. The product placement is going to be nuts in this next episode, which I've heard plenty of things about that. But that is where we're going to go in the next episode here with Loki season 2. What did you guys think of this episode? Comment down below all your thoughts on the very convoluted nature of this episode. How overwhelming was it for you? And did you enjoy the ride that this episode brought you on? And are you excited for the season as a whole? I'm very curious to hear all your thoughts. And along with Loki releasing today, I also have a review up for The Exorcist Believer, which I just talked about, and I have the review up for it right here on the channel, kicking off my 13 days of Halloween series that I do every single year on this channel. So definitely go ahead and check that out. At the end of the weekend, I'm going to try to have a deep dive into The Exorcist, The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, and The Exorcist 3, which I cannot wait to talk about all three of those films in a more in-depth and more, I guess, analysis type of way, because I find all of those movies extremely fascinating. And along with, you know, VHS and Five Nights at Freddy's that's coming out later in October, I'm going to have so many reviews up here on this channel for all of you guys. So if you enjoyed this video, like I said, comment down below your thoughts on Loki, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews just like this one. I hope to see you all in my next one.